Welcome to the Josh Gerben Show, because law school didn't teach business.
Hi everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Josh Gerben Show. This is the show where we talk about the business of our profession, the business of law, basically everything they didn't teach us in law school about how to run and grow a practice of law. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. This is one of my all-time favorite topics, sales. It's sort of like a dirty 5-letter word in the legal industry. If you tell any lawyer that they need to be a salesperson, it's sort of like, oh, that's beneath me. I went to 3 years of law school and I'm a really smart person, so I don't do sales. And for anyone with that attitude, you need to completely leave that at the door. The lawyers that we most look up to are probably the best salespeople in our profession. And what I mean by that is that the partners at law firms that have clients that everybody looks up to, how do you think they've gotten those clients? Most of the time it's through really good sales techniques. Or if you're aspiring to run and grow your own law practice, how do you think somebody started a law firm and grew it? Through being a really good salesperson. So if you as a lawyer don't understand the basic fundamentals of sales, it's going to be really hard for you to acquire clients and even keep clients along the way. So basically what I have to go over with you today is what I'm calling Gerben's 5 fundamentals to legal sales. Okay, so here they are. I'm going to run through them real quick, and then we're going to go back and dive into each category. So the first fundamental is you need to be accessible. The second one is you need to use phone over email. The third is that you need to be a human. The fourth is that you need to be a very good listener and have empathy. And the fifth is that you need to follow up and close. So let's go through each one and I'll tell you a little bit about what I mean. The first is that you need to be extremely accessible during the sales process. This means that if a prospective client calls you, calls your firm, and has a question about a potential legal matter, there needs to be a way to get back to that person immediately. Now, I know you may have a meeting or you may have something going on, but the very first free moment of your life that occurs after that inquiry or lead comes in, you need to get back to that person. Even if it's a referral and the person isn't necessarily shopping around, you need to make the prospective client feel important. So immediately call the person back. Even if you get their voicemail, oh, I just got your message. I'm so sorry to have missed you. I'll follow up with an email and we can schedule a time to talk in the next day or so. And make sure you're on it. Send an email. Ask them when they can talk. Give them some times you're available. But being super accessible is so important. I'd like to tell a story about how when I started my law firm, I had my phone as a cell phone. So this way here, wherever I was, I could get a call from a prospective client. I remember I would be away on like a getaway weekend with my wife, and we'd be somewhere. One weekend stands out. We went up to Atlantic City from Washington, D.C. It's a kind of a quick trip. So went up there for the weekend. We're walking around. I've got my cell phone on me. It's Saturday. Phone rings. I'm picking it up and diving into a store, because it's windy outside, trying to get a quiet place to take the call so that I can see, hey, does this person need a trademark? What can I do for them? I'm not waiting until Monday morning to see who happened to call me while I was away. I'm trying to start a business here. So if somebody's going to call and they need potentially a trademark, I'm going to answer the phone. And that was a really big advantage of mine early on, is that people would call and just get me. And I cannot tell you how many prospective clients would say to me, oh, you're the attorney. I'm like, yeah, it's me. They're like, you're the guy we saw on the website. Yeah, it's me. Oh, wow, I didn't expect to be able to talk to you. And then we'd have a great conversation and the person would sign up for some work. And many times I get the feedback that, I've called 3 or 4 other places. No one picked up the phone. I didn't even, people don't leave messages anymore. So, they call, they don't get anybody. They call the next place. So being able to just pick up the telephone and answer calls, or even if somebody would call and we would get a message, or even if we got a missed call, I'd just call that number right back and say, I'm so sorry I missed your call. Were you calling us about something? That aggressiveness led to me being able to build a client base very early on. And I will tell you right now, that's actually a weakness of our firm. So if a prospective client contacts us, it can be a little bit of time before we can get back to them or get a lawyer on the phone with them. And they will call other law firms and get lawyers on the phone quicker than we can get on the phone. So we lose business to that now. Now, our law firm's a little bit more mature, so we're not chasing every lead that comes in the door. But for lawyers that don't get a lot of leads or potential clients, there's no reason you shouldn't be super accessible to these people. And that applies throughout the sales process. So even after the first call, you need sometimes some follow-up to sell legal work. It's sometimes it doesn't just sell in the first call, right? So if the prospective client has a question or they email you some information, make it your priority to get back to them. It should be a priority over all else. An existing client of yours, you can manage expectations. You can say, you know what, I'm so sorry. I'm going to be 24 hours later in getting back to you than I thought because of X, Y, or Z. Something came up. That client's always going to understand. It's the prospective client that won't, because they don't yet have that rapport with you. They're not yet committed to you. So getting right back to them, making them feel comfortable that you're very good at communication is going to be critical to getting them to sign up and be a client of yours. So the next point, which is use phone and not email, is sort of a supplemental point to the first one, if you will, but it's so important I wanted to separate it out. Email answers questions and phone calls build relationships. So if a prospective client emails you and you have a quick answer and you say, oh, I know the answer to this question. I'm a smart lawyer. I can just email them back. Okay, so you send them the email. Great, they got their question answered. What's next? What's next in your sales process? I don't know. Okay, but if you pick up the phone and say, oh, hey, Mary, I got your question. Yeah, that's a great question. Here's what I'm thinking about that. Oh, okay, yeah, what else are you doing today? Oh, and you develop the relationship, hear about something that's happening in their life. Now, all of a sudden, you have a back and forth. Plus, they're hearing your voice, okay? So somebody hearing your voice, getting used to you, getting used to the type of person you are, developing a relationship and trust is critical to somebody selecting you as their attorney. Because when you get selected as an attorney, you're handling something that's very important for someone that they clearly can't handle themselves. So the amount of trust they have to have in you is significant. And the more you can develop a relationship during the sales process, the more likely it is they're going to select you because you're the nice, friendly voice on the phone as opposed to the guy that's just shooting them an email back with a simple answer to a question. Okay, and this applies for everything during the process. You may have some in-person meetings with folks depending on how your firm is structured, but if you are getting emails from people and you can respond with a phone call, you would be surprised how far that goes. I don't want to necessarily pick on millennials here, but I'm going to a little bit. This is especially a problem for the younger generation. It's coming up into law practice. I see it frequently that there's just this desire to shoot off a quick email and move on to the next thing because it's just a question and it's no big deal. But if you call somebody and you develop that relationship, it means the world sometimes to that person that they're getting to know you, and it's going to make bringing them in as a client so much easier. So point 3 on my list is be a human. And what I mean by this is that most lawyers exist in some weird world where they don't know how to talk to regular human beings anymore. So we went through 3 years of law school and all of a sudden we can't speak normal English. And when you get on the phone with a prospective client, you're talking in all sorts of, technical legal terms to show them how smart you are. And that's fine if you want to do that a little bit, but make sure you're being a human and make sure you explain things in words that people can understand, that people that didn't go to law school will understand. And if you're able to do that, you're going to find that you're going to have a much better connection with the prospective client. Now, the other side to being a human is just learning about the person that could be your client. So instead of just talking about legal matters, you need to find a common interest, something that you share with this other person. So myself, I have 3 young kids. And one of the first things I always kind of find out about somebody is what their family situation is. So if they're married and they have a young family, we immediately have a connection. If you're a parent of a young child or you have been a parent of a young child, you know that parents have a connection because we're all going through something that's pretty unique and pretty challenging. So there's just automatically that connection and people will feel more comfortable with you. One of my favorite calls will be someone will call me up and there's a screaming baby in the background, right? Oh, I'm so sorry, I kind of work from home. And that's very common these days. And my first response is, well, I have 3 kids in the other room. If you want me to bring them in, we can kind of have a competition so you can have the most background noise. It immediately sets everybody at ease because now they know about my situation too. I'm not some lawyer sitting in an office somewhere that's soundproof overlooking the city. No, I'm just somebody else. I'm working too. This is my job. And I have kids. But you may not be kids, right? So you could have sports interests that could be common, a common theme with a client. You could have some kind of hobby. Find out about what your client does. And that just could extend to more about their business, their personal life. But if you make that connection with someone and you take the time to do that, you're going to be one of the only attorneys they're talking to that actually does. Because again, most attorneys are very interested in answering the legal questions. This is how much it costs to do this. This is what our representation would look like, and keeps it in a very formal tone and all these fancy legal terms. How about you just act like you're having a beer with the person? And I cannot tell you how much of a difference that will make in your sales process. Just be a human. Be normal. The next point on my list is to be a good listener and have empathy. This is another thing I think lawyers are terrible at. I cannot tell you how many calls I've been on with other attorneys, and they're just talking. And the client will try to jump in and say something, and the lawyer just keeps going. I don't know. I wish I had a good answer for it, but I think in law school we're taught to just continue to argue our points. And when you're talking to a prospective client, for that matter, an existing client, you're not trying to argue with them. You're not trying to make your point. You're trying to give them information that they need. And that information is going to be very different person to person. So listening is critical. And here's what I mean by that. So I'm a trademark attorney, and for 11 years I've pretty much sold the same service to thousands and thousands of clients. Okay, we have to do a trademark search for you. You have a new name, we have to do a trademark search, we have to file the application, follow through the registration. It is a pretty straightforward service and process. But every single call I've ever taken from a prospective client has been different, because everybody has something that's worrying them. It may be that they went online and they saw a similar trademark and they're not sure what to do about it. It may be that they don't know how long the process takes, and that's their biggest concern. It may be that they wonder, well, once I have my trademark registered, what happens then? So it's funny because everybody's got these different concerns. And you may have a prospective client that really could care less about how long it's going to take the first few steps to happen, but really worried about what's going to happen 6 months from now. And then you'll have another client who wants to know what's going to happen day 1, day 2, day 3, and can't even function and think about 6 months from now. So you really have to listen about what the prospective client is concerned about. And in order to understand that, you may have to actually ask them some questions and then just be quiet and let them answer. In negotiations, there's this idea that you should be quiet a lot so that the other side will want to just sort of fill the empty space. And I believe that's true in the sales context as well. Obviously, we want to talk, we want to provide information and things like this, but there's a point where you just need to be quiet. Let the prospective client fill that empty space, and you will find out what is concerning them and then address that specific concern. Even if your concern about their matter is something that's completely different than what they're worried about, you need to take care of what they're worried about before you get to anything else. Because if you can resolve that, you're much more likely to get them as a client. And the other part of this point is to have empathy, okay? And I think that's also something we lack as lawyers because we see so many problems. Like our whole day is just solving problems. So we're always like, oh, yeah, that's a problem. You should have done that, but now I'll fix it for you, right? Or, oh man, I can't believe they did that. Now I'm going to have to fix that. And that attitude pervades to the prospective client when you're talking to them. So instead of thinking about, oh, I know everything because I've been doing this for 10 years and I can't believe this person, like everybody else, they keep making the same mistake. What you should do is stop. Think about the person's situation. Think about what they didn't know before the problem occurred. And have empathy and explain that empathy to them. And say, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I understand why this got away, or I understand why you didn't think that this would be a problem and now it is. And this is something that is not uncommon, and you're not alone, and we've certainly fixed problems like this before, and we can absolutely help you with this one. And having that little bit of empathy and stopping and explaining you understand why they would have done something and not making the client feel bad is going to, again, build that trust in you It's going to build the likability that you have with the client, much more likely for the client to come to you and want to use you as their attorney. My final rule of sales is you need to follow up and you need to close. So there are entire companies that have been created to help salespeople follow up with prospective clients. Okay, Salesforce, among others. I'm not suggesting you need to go and spend a whole bunch of money on software. A simple Excel sheet is all you really need. If you talk to somebody or somebody emails you or whatever your communication is, there needs to be a plan to follow up with the person. Now, in every law practice, this is probably going to look a little different. In my practice, if a client calls and talks to someone, typically within 24 to 48 hours, we're following up again to see if any other questions came up, because we want to, we know they're thinking about this, so we want to be in front of them and make sure that if anything has changed in a day or two, that we're on it. And then after that, we might go to a week. We don't want to be too annoying, so we might go to a week after that. We'll follow up a little bit further, and then maybe 2 weeks. Every prospective client could even be a little different depending on how ready they seem to get going or how urgent their matter is versus if it's something they need to hire a lawyer for in 3 or 4 months, right? But you need to follow up and you need to do it regularly. I get a lot of pushback even internally when I talk about follow-up, and they'll say, well, if they were interested, they might get back to us. Oh, no. This is not the way it works, right? And if you just wait for people to get back to you, you're probably going to not be in business for very long. Or you're not going to develop that client base for your law firm. You need to be aggressive. You need to tell people you're very interested in being their lawyer and you think you can really help them. And this is where it comes in. You need to close. Have whatever you need to close. If it's an engagement letter or it's a retainer or whatever it is, make sure you get the document and the request to the prospective client. Hey, Bob, it was great talking to you today. Here's a short engagement letter that you can sign to get started. We just require a $1,000 or $2,000 retainer with the letter. You can mail it in. I can accept a credit card, whatever you do. That's all we need to get started. Ask for the sale. Even great salespeople forget this sometimes. You're talking, you have a great relationship. Ask for the sale. And also as attorneys, we normally need that engagement letter, right? So you need to have that ready to go and you need to put it in front of the person so they know what they need to do. Because once they sign the engagement letter, once you have the retainer, the whole world changes. Now they're in your firm, they're your client. Now you have to service them, which is a whole different ballgame. But you don't have to worry about somebody coming and poaching your client. So we live in a very competitive world. And depending on your type of practice, you may have a handful, you may have dozens of competitors that you have to deal with. When I started my practice, there was maybe a handful. Now there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of competitors for the type of work that we do. And in order to stay competitive, there's a number of ways you can do this. Obviously, price is one, but I always encourage lawyers not to race to the bottom on price. So the other way you can really stay competitive is to be extremely good at sales. And this is because if a prospective client calls your firm and they get the red carpet treatment, they get phone calls back, they get follow-up, they get a true interaction with you where you're learning about each other and you're learning about their business or whatever their matter is or whatever's going on in their personal life, you are going to stand out from the crowd, from everybody else that just calls them back with a standard cookie cutter response. So I hope you found this show helpful. And the only thing I ask is that you please leave a comment or review if it's on the podcast or on our YouTube channel, however you've consumed the content. I would greatly appreciate that. And of course, if you found this helpful, please share it with anybody else that you think would find it helpful as well. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.